Hey, welcome. So this is another installment in a series that I started a while back, but kind of left on the wayside, which is sort of a build in public series where I just show some of the things that I'm working on with the block editor, things I'm trying to build, things I'm trying to see if these are good ideas, and just put them in front of people. So in the first few videos of the series, I was working on a tool where you would be able to add custom CSS inside of the block editor, like on individual blocks or like globally and stuff. And I've just really stopped working on that because I just really don't like the idea of writing CSS in the block editor, even though I understand that that's like kind of a common pattern for page builders and tools to let you write your CSS inside of like a user interface. It's just never ended up being a workflow that I really liked or used. And as I saw what's happening with a lot of the block style stuff that's coming down from WordPress core in the future, it just seemed to me like not a worthy, it just seemed to me like not something that I was going to need, especially as section styles come out in WordPress 6.6 and these more granular block styles. But one thing that I have been working on between like 5 other random ideas is this idea of block settings. And this is something that I post a little bit about. So I thought I would do kind of a walkthrough of what I'm thinking and get some feedback and send this to anybody who wants to test it. So let's take a look at this block settings idea of what I'm thinking of. To start with, I want to go back to something called CMB2, which is a very popular plugin, or was a very popular plugin sort of before ACF, Advanced Custom Fields, took over maybe sort of developer mindshare. But CMB2 is something I think a lot of older WordPress developers started with, which was essentially similar to ACF, a way to build custom fields for your posts, right? Custom fields, custom meta boxes and stuff. And so CMB2 is great. It still runs great. I actually have sites running the block editor and it works pretty much the same as ACF, where it loads custom fields in a drawer. So CMB2 is still great and still powerful. The big difference between CMB2 and Advanced Custom Fields was that with CMB2, you did everything in like your theme or your plugin or like in code. In ACF, when you want to make a bunch of custom fields for a post or an options page or something, you do it inside of WordPress and you have to fill out all the forms and stuff like that. And that's great if you're not like dealing with code and you're just doing it all inside of WordPress. That's a great workflow. But if you are in a situation where you want your custom fields to be written in code, because sometimes when you're doing stuff in ACF, if you have multiple developers, it gets hard to sync fields between each other. The JSON directories don't always work out exactly the way you want. You have to kind of really keep an eye on that. When you make all your custom fields in your code base, you don't have to think about it because the code is the code, and version control is something that kind of solved all those issues for you. So CMB2 and that approach of there's no user interface, there's nothing for you to see in WordPress, it's you build all your custom fields in code, was really great and still is really great. So this is kind of the inspiration I'm taking, and I'll just show you like an example. I mean, it's been a while since I've set up a new site with CMB2, but it's this idea that you literally just make your custom fields using just like PHP. And so it's really simple. You can kind of extend it with extra functions, but you say what kind of field, do you want it to be a text field, a URL field, an image field, whatever. You give a little description, that sort of thing. So this sort of approach, you build out custom fields and they show up on the front end, super handy. All of that aside to say, I just wanted there to be something like that, but for blocks, adding custom fields to existing WordPress blocks, because it's something that I do a lot of the time, but it's not something that's super intuitive or easy. So the best tool for this right now is something from 10up called Block Extensions. I really recommend, if you're doing anything with the block editor, you should be checking out 10up's block components repository. They have a ton of handy components that you can use in the block editor. But again, the block editor, it's built in React, it's built in JavaScript. So even to use a tool like this still requires a lot of that. So let's take a look at block extensions from 10up to get a little idea. They have this great documentation site, which honestly, if you haven't read their Gutenberg best practices, it's really great. But they kind of explain how when you make block styles for your block, it's kind of a pain because you can only pick one style. So they came up with this block extension idea where you could make different custom fields and save those in a block attribute. So you could break things apart and have different custom fields. So they show like a toggle field, a drop down, a color field. So this is exactly what I want, right? This is kind of solving that issue, but block extensions are a JavaScript tool. So you have to have a build process. You have to import it. You have to kind of define and build all of the user interface yourself. You have to use their function, but you have to actually import the text component from React. You have to import this from WordPress components. You have to import all the different pieces, and you have to really build out the entire thing. It doesn't just like create all that for you the way that like a CMB2 or a ACF where, it makes the fields for you. You don't have to literally code the fields. In this case, you do. So that was the next step. I thought, man, I just really want something where I can just say, hey, I need a text field and I want it to save as this. And I just don't want to have to like load up a bunch of JavaScript to do it. So that's where I came up with this block settings. It's really built on concepts from these other developers. So let's take a look at the front end and then we'll kind of take a look at what it looks like on the back end. So I have two different versions right now. One is a checkbox field that lets you select multiple, and then one is a dropdown that lets you select one thing. So I'm kind of playing around with it, but so we have different blocks here, and then here we have a button block, and here I've added a block settings panel, and it lets you pick different options from this custom field right here. And if I add more custom fields, they'll keep going here. But like this is an option of a custom field where you can select checkboxes and stuff. And then when you save, all of this gets saved to the block and you can use it to make changes to the block. So this is the example of it looking like checkboxes, but I'm going to refresh and just show this is the same field, but if it rendered as a dropdown. So you could pick a default or you could pick one option. So really there's just two types of fields at this point. Drop-down field to pick one thing, or a checkbox field where you can select multiple things. And so what happens when you select this? So it saves whatever you picked as an attribute. So it saves it in that kind of like a JSON thing. So that's kind of important. We gave the name of a field and a value and it's getting saved here. But then I'm also having it take that value and add it as a class. So if you want to just style for CSS. So what that means is you can literally do this and this will add a CSS class, and then you can just add CSS and you can use this to design and add design options. So design options are super handy. This turns classes on and off or changes classes on the block, and it's basically doing the same thing that you would see in here, but you don't have to write it. So you could add some CSS, you could add some drop downs with some different fields, and your clients or yourself could just go in and select that, the CSS gets applied. So that's where it kind of is a little super handy, because even though we have these block styles, you can only pick one at a time. So this kind of, just like everything else, breaks it down, lets you be a little more granular with custom CSS. But like I said, it also saves it as an attribute. So let's take a look at what this looks like from a code level and what you would be doing. The idea here is that I would have this block settings plugin. You would just install the plugin. It would just be running on your site, just the same way that CMB2 runs on your site as a plugin, or ACF runs on your site as a plugin, or you can like bundle it inside a theme or something. There's ways to do that, but just imagine you have this plugin running. Then in your theme or custom plugin, you would basically call this register block setting function. And so the idea here is that just like you would call a register block style or register block variation, there's all these things. Registering a block setting or a block custom field would be like another thing you could do. And so you just give it a name, like what do you want the attribute to be called? We're just going to call it prefix button link. Prefix is just like our prefix. We could assume that that's like, we could call the prefix like WP dev or whatever, whatever you want to do it. But prefixing things, you can pass an array of block types. So what type of block do you want this setting to show up? So if you wanted it to show up on group blocks, cover blocks, column blocks, if you want to show up on multiple ones, it's an array, so you can pass multiple ones. Super handy. What's the label for your form input? So in this case, our label is select button link type. That's kind of what shows up here. That multiple is the ability to say, like, do you want it as a checkbox or a select? So I kind of have gone back and forth, like, should I incorporate multiple field types, like letting you write in anything, letting you use radio buttons? Obviously, I think an image field would be popular, a text area field or text field, but I'm not sure yet about that. Because I just don't know if there's a use case, but maybe. And then for ones like the checkbox or the select, you have this options array. And so what we're doing is, like, in this case, we're passing a value and a label. So the value maybe is nothing, and that's the default option. And then, so we have in ours, let's just look at what it is. It's a block setting that lets you set a certain type of link. Like, we do this a lot where the user wants to put in a button that links to like their global like newsletter pop-up or their global like contact form pop-up or something like that. And we don't want them to have to like come into this and type in like hashtag newsletter and remember that all the time or whatever. So we can let them leave the link blank and we can just say, hey, this is a global call to action. Just link it to whatever our global CDA URL is. Or, hey, I want this to trigger the pop-up modal for subscribers if they click the button. So we're just kind of like giving them that option, right? A little extra custom field. And so, you know, it's just the value and then the label. So it's just, imagine a drop down and you're just saving the value and the label. So this value, if they select it, it gets added as a class on the block, like I said. So you could literally just use this for styling. So now the button will have this class and you could use that to just do some CSS or something like that. But it also gets saved as an attribute. And an attribute, like I said, is that JSON object of all the like block data. And so what's nice about that is you could even do something like this. So this is a core function, render block. And this is something that we often do, which is you're filtering a block before it gets spit out onto the front end of WordPress. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, if my button has this attribute that we, you know, defined over here, and the value is this, filter out the block content. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm using the HTML tag processor. You could use like a regex or a string blaze, but I'm saying, hey, take that block content and replace the link with the URL of my website and spit that out. Or if they picked the subscription pop-up option, hey, add this like data attribute to the link because that's, you know, the tool that I'm using to trigger pop-up modals or something like that. Or maybe I want to also at the same time set the attribute on the link to be like, you know, make sure that the link is pointing to just nothing or hashtag subscribe or something like that, right? So, or maybe it's setting up like an on click or something like that. So these are different ways that WordPress builds that you can do stuff like filtering blocks on the front end. So I'm actually thinking like maybe this could be built in as an option here, like, or here, like what to do if the person picks this, like maybe there could be like a render block and then, or maybe there could be like a style or something. But the idea is that you'd be able to just write this to add settings, no JavaScript, no build process, no React, no components, a lot more limited. You're not going to get to design it exactly like you want, you know, and it opens a can of worms because right now I'm putting it all inside of one little block settings panel. But like, what if you said, well, I want multiple panels and I want to put some stuff here and there? Well, then it's like going to get more complicated. So I got to think about all that. So this is what I've been sort of working on. So if you're interested in testing, this is on GitHub. You're allowed to look at it. It has kind of a basic documentation explaining how to register a setting. You just call this function on like an init handler and what it will look like. That's kind of an old screenshot because I fixed their annoying space issue. And it kind of tells you like, hey, whatever they selected, it gets added as a class and it gets added as an attribute. So all of this is here for you to test and play with. The only issue is that right now you would just have to comment this out, although I might comment it out before the end of this video, so that way you don't have to do that. So let me know if you're interested in trying this, if you see more ideas or features, or if this is a plugin that you would be interested in using. Again, it requires you to be writing code in a theme or a functions.php file or something like that. So that is definitely part of it. But let me know if that's something you'd be interested in doing and if you have any ideas for me. And that's today's Build in Public update.